Wade Thaxton returns to the show today with his wife, Clarissa. They are here to talk about their grief journeys and how their marriage survived against incredible odds. Their honesty and vulnerability permeates the entire episode. They share the hard parts and the not so pretty parts, and how they got through it to the other side. They will give you incredible tools for the journey, showing by example there is a way. It's not always easy, but there is a way through it. Join us for 55 minutes. It just might change your life. Welcome to the Grief Mentor podcast with Clarissa Davis. It exists to restore hope, promote healing, and equip grieving souls for life after loss. I will illuminate God's Word through the eyes of grief and provide interviews that speak healing into the mind, body, and spirit of the brokenhearted. I'm so glad you're here. Those of you that listened to episode 6, Surviving Suicide Loss with Wade Thaxton, may recognize one of my guests today. He has returned with his wife, Clarissa, and together they're going to walk us through how grief affected their marriage and how they survived and where they are today. And I'm thrilled that they said yes. Welcome to this show, Wade and Clarissa.
Thanks for having us. It's good to be here.
Yeah, good to be back on.
Going back to Wade's episode on surviving loss by suicide. By the way, that's episode number 6. So if you haven't listened to that episode, I encourage you to go back and listen to that if your life has been touched by suicide. In fact, you might want to listen to these 2 episodes back to back because it'll give you a deeper window into the perspective of their grief journey. Today, we're going to add Clarissa's perspective to the story and get you guys a picture of what it was like to walk through grief in their marriage. Clarissa, what would you like to tell us about that time in your life?
Sure. So, Wade and I talked about this the other night preparing, and Wade had already experienced some deep grief before we ever met because he lost his brother to suicide. So I recall even while we were dating, he communicated so well with me and said, hey, it's September. This is the month that the anniversary of when my brother passed away. So if I seem distant or different than usual, that's what's going on. So he was just so upfront with me in the beginning of even our dating relationship and was open about how grief had touched him. And I had not, other than losing grandparents, I've not at that point experienced that. So I appreciated his willingness to be vulnerable and help me understand a little bit of what that was. And we then, of course, got married, and I'm trying to think how long into our marriage we were, but your mom passed away. She had a battle with cancer that I know Wade talked about in the other episode. And
6 years.
Yeah, we were married 6 years at that point.
I believe so.
So she had beat cancer, but was still battling the effects that it had on her body. And her passing was sudden because we thought the cancer is gone. She's healing. So we were on a trip out in Yosemite that we had planned a year in advance, like a dream trip, and received that call that she'd had a stroke and, didn't think she was going to make it. And we did not make it home in time. And so that was, I guess, the first big grief in our marriage, event, the passing of his mom. And then I know Wade shared that almost a year later, which was in June, his mom passed away in July, and the following June
30th.
Yeah. Sorry, I always think July.
Her birthday's in July.
I should know that, yes. Yeah. And his dad took his life. And at that point, we were living up there. After his mom passed away, we sold our house and didn't find a new house to move into. So we moved in with his dad, and it helped us to have time to find a house to purchase, but it was a help to his dad to, be with him and help support him. We were living there with him. And to be honest, I told Wade, I said, it was hard. His mom, such an amazing cook, baker, just was always in the kitchen, and she had hospitality. Like, didn't matter if she was expecting you or not. If you came over, she would prepare something for you or had food for you. When we moved in after his mom passed away, I struggled with, how do I prepare meals in this kitchen when this is Carol's kitchen. That was a challenge, for me, that I don't know that I even really voiced at the time, but it was, just something, that was a challenge to, I wanted to be able to like be in the kitchen and help the family and cook, but it just felt very strange. And that, well, this is Carol's kitchen. She should be here.
Teresa, I wonder too, and I know this isn't the same grief loss, but we had to struggle through infertility before my mom's diagnosis of cancer. And that led us to the path of adoption, which we had already talked about before we got married, and knew that God had chosen that for us. We just thought we had our plan of how it's going to work out, and he flipped it on us. But that was kind of another loss at one point. It was like, well, we can't even, there was no reason. There was no medical reason for us not to be able to make a child. And then we can't. For 3 years, we tried, the emphasis on try. And then finally it was like, all right, well, God's got a different plan. So we're going to go through adoption. That's a whole nother story. I don't know if it matters, but struggling through those things, those challenges that every marriage is going to face, whether it's financial hurdles or job change or loss of a mother-in-law or father-in-law, or, maybe a stillborn child. I mean, there's so many ways to experience grief in a marriage. And we were talking the other night, we feel like we've hit almost all of them. It seems like, what else can we not ask? Just, I feel like we've hit enough. We've tackled the list. So now we can move on smoothly.
Let me get the timeline straight. So you guys were married 6 years when his mom passed. So when was Eleanor adopted into your marriage? How many years into your marriage was Eleanor adopted?
4 years in. So we were married in 2008. Eleanor, was born in 2012, and she was 3. No, she was 2 when Wade's mom passed away. So
okay, so then give us the time frame now when you've moved in with Wade's dad. Then how old was Eleanor then?
She was 2 at the time. She turned 3 when we lived there. She had a birthday and turned 3. I was pregnant with Wesley after Wade's mom passed away. Just several months after I found out I was pregnant. And I know that was such a joy for us, having gone nearly 7 years with negative pregnancy tests. And now I'm pregnant, but then his mom isn't here. And she so longed for that. And she, obviously with Eleanor got that, but it's that joy with some sorrow. Yes. Yeah.
I wanted to share this with you just to kind of put things in perspective for our listeners. There is Holmes and Ray has a stress scale that they use. 0 is no stress. And then 100 is like the max, the worst possible stress you can have. If they only go up to 100. Okay. Just to give you guys a perspective, death of a close family member. Now we've not even got to Wade's dad yet. So the loss of his mother, a close family member, is 63 rating on the scale. Pregnancy is 40. So there you guys are already a little over 100. And then change in living conditions is another 25 points. So you guys are like already over the red zone. I didn't even consider the infertility when I was looking at this stress scale. So I just feel like I want to point that out, because any marriage, just with the first challenge that you had with infertility, can stress a marriage to the point to where it's possible that the marriage doesn't last. So I just want to give our listeners and viewers a perspective of the amount of stress that, when you talk about it, it doesn't let us really see completely into what that was like for you guys, but you had some major life changes. I don't know if you really want to give us your perspective of the day Wade's dad died. Would you like to do that, or would you like for us to move on? Do you feel comfortable doing that?
I can. And, Wade was traveling a lot at that time for work, which meant Eleanor and I were at his dad's house, and he stayed very busy as well. Obviously, having just lost his wife, he was gone a lot and just staying busy, I'm sure too, because that's, one of those coping mechanisms. And so Eleanor and I were there alone a lot, just the two of us, and then a lot with Jim. And we had these sweet moments where in the mornings, Gramps and Eleanor would sit at the bar, talk together, and have breakfast. And a lot of times he would eat a banana and then go throw it outside. And I know that Eleanor has little bits of memories like that. And I think that's so precious. I'm so thankful that we had those moments, because at the time I didn't realize how precious they were. And now I realize. But that day, Jim had just come back from a trip to Florida, and he got home very late. Wade was out of town for work. Eleanor and I had plans to go to the zoo. So we were up eating breakfast, and Jim got up and got some coffee. So I was, talked to him about his trip, and not a very long conversation, but just a little bit, and everything seemed normal. And then Eleanor and I left, and so I assumed he was in his room taking the nap. And I took a nap at that time as well, because Eleanor took a nap and I was pregnant, and I was in the habit of taking an afternoon nap when Eleanor did. When Wade got home, I had let him know. I said, your dad has, been in his room for a long time. I think, I'm not seeing him, but he had a late night. That's when Wade shared in his podcast that when he checked, he wasn't in his room when he went down to check the barn, and he found him. So, I replayed that morning over and over so many times, because I think, what if, I don't know why I didn't invite him to go to the zoo with us. It would have been so easy for me to just say, come with us, Gramps. We actually didn't make it to the zoo because we got stuck in traffic, the bridge, for some reason. And so we ended up getting off an exit and going somewhere else. If we would have turned around and gone back home, then it could have changed everything. So just replay those things in my mind and wish that I could have done something different. But we don't, Wade and I have talked about it. We don't know that would have made a difference.
I really appreciate you sharing that with us, Clarissa, because I want the listeners to understand the depth of grief that you both felt. I'm releasing an episode on EMDR this coming Sunday, and he shares, and he's worked with many people that have gone through what you guys have gone through. And one of the things that he said that I'll never forget was that everybody feels exactly how you felt, that if you'd have done this or that. But the truth and the evidence is, if they've made up their mind to do that, there's nothing that you can do to stop them. If it hadn't been that time, it might have been another time. So I know that's a heavy weight, and I'm very thankful that you were able to share that with us, because I think it will help everybody understand a little bit better when you share your story of what you and Wade went through after that. According to Dr. Vasquez, she is a certified grief counselor. She says that survival of a marriage while grieving depends on how you react to the loss, how your spouse responds, and how you support each other. Obviously, grief significantly impacts marriages and its ability to survive. How would you say that grief impacted your relationship?
That's a big question. One of the things I've talked about before is a disconnect. And I feel like there was a distance between us, and it wasn't anybody's fault. It was, Wade had to pull in to deal with grief, and I felt him pulling away from me, but it wasn't him pulling away from me. It was just him probably going into that survival mode of processing his own grief. In a lot of ways, that was one of our biggest struggles, is feeling disconnected from each other, and me taking that very personally, because I'm a people pleaser. And so if I feel like someone in the room with me isn't happy, I want to do something to fix that. And I would think that I'd done something wrong. I mean, we're talking years later, still like having that where, Mother's Day, he's become more drawn back because it's painful. And I would take it personally because I think, well, you're not talking to me, so I feel like we've dealt with that a lot at different times. And I've learned that typically when I feel distant from him, or I feel like he's pulling away, it's not about me. It's about what he's feeling, and that he is probably dealing with something that is grief related, and that I can need to come alongside him in prayer, ask him how I can help, but not assume that I've done something wrong. And so that's one of the biggest things. What would you say?
Well, along those lines, I can remember, I think we had an argument about it. I felt like she was disrespecting my grief by making it about her. And that was such a struggle for me to understand where she's coming from, because it was so personal for me. It was like, this is my grief. These are my parents. This day, this anniversary is Mother's Day, Father's Day, whatever it was. And she was trying to make it about her. I'm like, it has nothing to do with you. I mean, it does because we're married, but these people, I lost them. These are the people who brought me into the world. So that was a big struggle that we had to. It took us a couple of years to figure that out, and then deal with it appropriately. And she just, has to, or hopefully gives me some space to feel what I need to feel on those days. We just had Mother's Day a couple weekends ago, and it's been eight years, I think, since Mom passed, and it still hurts. I've shared with you, Teresa, how special my mom was and still is in a lot of ways, and it royally, it bothers me because my son has never known my mom nor my dad, because Wesley was born 1 month exactly after my dad took his life, and really, barely a year more than Mom was passed away. So I have a child that doesn't have a clue who Grammy and Gramps are, other than a picture or pictures and stories that we tell him.
Yeah.
And so that's really a bittersweet thing, because he's a chip off me. He resembles me a lot, and his sense of humor is so me. And my mom was just like, her heart would have been so full to experience this little boy. And she doesn't get that at all. Not on this side.
And Eleanor, as she's grown too, because she's such a girly girl. And I know your mom bought her shoes. Like, she was 2 years old and she had so many shoes because Carol was she would say, I couldn't decide, so I just bought them both.
Oh,
yeah.
Let's dive into that a little bit. Wesley was born 1 month after your dad passed. So not only are you guys grieving a significant loss, now you have a new child, you've got a new person in your household. And Clarissa, you've just had a baby in the midst of this, I don't want to say shadow of grief, but I'm not exactly sure the right term that could be used, but there still was that heavy, it'd been a month. So that heavy fog and isolation sometimes that you go through when you're grieving. So Clarissa, talk to us a little bit about that time.
Yeah, that was hard. I remember feeling so angry that I waited so long to experience my own pregnancy and birth and breastfeeding. I looked so forward to that time, and I felt like I got robbed. Then, because breastfeeding, not that it ever comes easy, but there was so much stress that I tried so hard and it just did not work. And it may have not worked under the perfect circumstances either, but I just remember feeling so angry that I waited 7 years for a pregnancy, and now it comes after, this devastating loss where I don't feel like we can really just enjoy that. And so it was also, anytime you have a new baby, you're lacking sleep and you need that support of your spouse. And Wade could not support me. And it wasn't his fault that he couldn't support me. It was because he had just he was grieving his father and that tragedy, and his mom both. And so I can clearly remember one day, and I mean, it must have been within weeks after bringing Wesley home from the hospital, and we were still living up at his parents' house. And Eleanor was 3 and having major meltdown city. And I was just overwhelmed. And I called Wade, and he just told me, he said, you can't call me with this. I can't handle that. That's too much for me to handle on top of everything else. And that broke me, because I thought, I've been able to rely on him for everything. Like, that's what we're here for. And that was hard to hear, but it was the truth, that at that time, I needed to find someone else that could help me and support me. And so, I have a wonderful, wonderful parents and wonderful friends that I was able to start reaching out to in those ways. So yeah, I feel like it was a fog thinking back on it now. Like, I don't know how we survived that. But
Well, you forgot we were sleeping on the floor of the family room
while I was pregnant. Yes.
well, after, yeah, while you were pregnant and after, while you're trying to breastfeed.
Yes.
Because I think, I don't know if I told you, Teresa, but so we're up at Dad's house. My foster brother and his wife are up there, my half sister and her husband, and then her son and his wife, and there might have been some young children. Everybody was up at Dad's house, Mom and Dad's house. And the night before the funeral, the sewer breaks. We're sleeping in the basement's finished. It's a walkout basement. And that's where our bedroom was at the time, was down there in the basement. I go down to get in bed at like 11 p.m. And as soon as my foot hit the threshold of the carpet, I was like, the carpet's wet. We were up till 2, 3 in the morning waiting for the plumber to get there to figure it out. And there was a break in from the septic going into the septic. The ground had shifted and it had finally broken on that night or that day. So now we can't sleep downstairs because there's a sewer leak all throughout the basement downstairs. So I grabbed our mattress, we put it upstairs. We slept the night up there. We slept for, I don't know, a month or more on a mattress, just one mattress in the middle of a floor.
One of the things that often happens in a situation like you guys are in, Clarissa, we look to our husbands as our support. They're our helpmeet for everything. And so not only was Wade understandably not able to meet those expectations, but yet here you are, a new mom, going through all the new mom things, and you have a toddler. You have a toddler that you're trying to care for. You guys are amazing. And that's why I wanted to have you guys on here, because I think it's amazing that you still love each other and you're still married and you're still working away at this thing called life. Wade, in looking back during that time, because you just were made a father for the second time. Mm-hmm. And how do you feel about that? What are those feelings that you have during that time that you weren't able to really be present? Or that's my interpretation. Maybe that's not your interpretation, but how would you describe that time for you?
It was just really a hard time. Nothing was easy. I felt like there was layer upon layer. We weren't in our own home. And even after we moved out of Dad's home, we moved into a rental, and we were in the rental for a year. And I remember feeling like nothing feels right in this world. I've lost my parents. I'm an orphan. Once you lose your second parent, you feel like an orphan. That's a normal, natural thing. It's like the people that brought you in this world are no longer here. I've got this awesome daughter that God gave us through adoption. I have this beautiful baby boy, and it was all bittersweet. Mm-hmm. It was a beautiful thing, yet I was just so broken on the inside. I remember when I found my dad, I knew that this is so much bigger than me, that there's no way I can deal with this myself. And that was kind of the thought I was echoing to Clarissa that night that we talked, or that day. It was like, you're going to have to figure it out. I can't do it. I can't help you right now. You're going to have to figure it out. So yeah, having this wonderful family and where my mom and dad's house was is such a beautiful setting. It's just beautiful up here. It's out in the woods a little bit on a hill. And it's like, how can you be surrounded in beauty, yet feel so broken inside, surrounded by a beautiful wife and 2 kids, and nothing feels right. nothing is, I felt so broken and so lost. And yet I'm next to the people that love me the most. How do you feel that way?
Grief includes emotional and physical symptoms. And we've kind of talked about this already, but I wanted to maybe talk about it a little bit more because I feel like there are so many people listening that have walked this road. Many symptoms of grief are irritability, aggression, fear, confusion, guilt, anger, anxiety, impaired concentration, loss of the interest in doing enjoyable things. So as a grieving person, when you're experiencing these emotions, the spouse, mistakenly perceives that those negative emotions are directed at them. So often supporting your spouse during those times, Clarissa, can seem easier said than done. You kind of touched on that a little bit. What did you learn from that experience, and how did you manage it?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because that was one of the things I had told Wade. I said, I felt like I lost a part of Wade through that I was grieving the loss of the joyful side of Wade. I never forget, I made a list before I ever met Wade of like characteristics I wanted in a husband. And one of them was to be childlike, a sense of like playfulness, just to have that joy. And Wade definitely has that, but he lost that. And so I feel like, and he's got it back, but there for a long time, I felt like I lost a part of him. And you're right, like I did take a lot of that personally. And so that was challenging. I will say that one of the things that helped me the most, and I know helped him the most, because the power of prayer is, I think, just so powerful. But I would pray over him specifically. I would pray that the Lord would restore the joy of his salvation to Wade, that he would bring joy back to Wade, not that it's happiness, but that he would find joy in the Lord. And that helped me. I don't have control over this, but God's in control of everything. And I can, he can work wonders. So I feel like that was one of the biggest ways that I could support him, is to not give up, to continue to pray those prayers for him. And also, we talked about this too, the grace, having grace, and like knowing that when there were hurtful conversations, that things were said in not the right way by both of us, that we needed to show each other grace in this time. And that wasn't easy, and Wade would remind me of that. He's so good because he had, that experience already, and he's gone through a grief share. So he knows that when you are with somebody who's grieving, that they need that extra grace and forgiveness, because like you said, hurt people. So he would remind me of that sometimes. And it's so true. You have to be willing to let things slide that maybe you wouldn't normally, and not take it personally when they snap at you or don't seem available. Be willing to recognize that it's bigger than you. And prayer, I just keep going back to the power of prayer, praying for him, next to him, over him, when he was struggling, just going up to him and holding his hand and praying. So
I hear so much compassion, Clarissa, in your voice as you talk about the time. Did you feel like, I'm going to break under this and I can't do this?
I can't say I did. I know that there were times where I definitely felt desperate and thought, I don't know what to do. Like, this is miserable. But I never felt that I was going to leave. Or I can remember a time though that it was just going a rough season, and Wade had made the comment, like, you all should just leave me. I think we talked about this the other night. You were in just such a deep, dark place that you couldn't fathom us sticking around with you, I think. Yeah. And I was like, no, like and that was something, thankfully, we both had a faith going into our marriage. And not that means you don't have struggles, or that you don't even, lots of people with a faith still, separate and all of that. But we were pretty firm in that going into our
Mhm.
marriage, and we would promised each other from the very beginning that we would not leave. Of course, you say that not knowing what's to come too. So yeah, not to say that I didn't feel desperate or lost or in a dark place, but I don't ever recall wanting to leave.
I think, Teresa, I'm very lucky that Clarissa, one, is a very committed person, very loyal person. And then she is very compassionate for other people. She has one of the things that drew me to her in the very beginning was she has such a big heart for God and for God's people. And that's probably what saved our marriage, because I know I didn't deserve it. I know I was a bear to deal with for years. This wasn't like a one night thing. This was, me in deep grief. When you take, mom dying on June 30th, then the very following year, dad passes away on June 4th. Think of what June 30th was. That was the anniversary of my mom's death. And now my dad's death is less than a month away. And then after 4 days later, we have a baby boy. It's like, how do you process that?
You
I don't
don't.
even, I don't know how I did it. I just know I was barely there.
Did you guys reach out? It's important not to solely rely on your spouse for strength. I mean, that's our go-to person, but were you guys able to recognize that you were going to have to go somewhere outside to a friend or family or a counselor to get help to help you during that time?
Yes. All of those. Yes. I know Wade was very wise. He knew in the very beginning after his dad passed away that he needed to seek counseling, and he did. And then, like I shared earlier, I recognized that I needed to lean on my friends and family more than during that time when I had the newborn. And so I have wonderful friends and family that are so supportive. And I know Wade, our community came we talked about that before. After Wade's dad passed away, we didn't even have to ask for help, and people showed up with cutting the grass and meals. And, so we thankfully had and still do have a wonderful community of friends and family. Into our marriage, I believe it was 2 years in after your dad passed away that finally we went to see a counselor together. So, and
Was it that long?
We were up at this house. So it was, yeah. So it was, and it was so needed because there were things that I was afraid to say because I didn't want to cause Wade to spiral into a dark place, but there were fears I had, and it gave us a safe place to talk. And not that Wade wasn't willing to listen to me before, but there was just a lot of fear on my part that if I said the wrong thing or did the wrong thing, that it might cause him to make a decision like his dad did. Honestly, there was a lot of that fear for me. So seeing a counselor was one of the best things that we did. And you don't even have to go through a tragedy. Seeing a counselor is a good thing.
This is such a complicated situation because of the significance of the grief and then the complication of the prior losses that resurface. I'm sure, Wade, we haven't talked about this, but grieving the death of your dad has to resurface all of the prior losses as well. So the amount that you were dealing with in order to be able to just not lose control, I'm sure was completely overwhelming. How would you describe your relationship with the Lord, Wade, during that time?
I think we have both been just growing our faith. We were people that loved Jesus and knew him well, but God has provided so much in these different seasons that we've gone through.
Mm-hmm.
So interestingly enough, I was leading a discipleship course with another guy. I'd been through it the 2 years previous, and then I don't even know where we were, right in the middle of it, more or less. It's a 2-year commitment to go through that discipleship course. And so there I was in the middle of it. And I called the other guy that I was leading with, co-leader, and I said, Chuck, this is what happened. I don't know what I could do. He's like, let me know. You come when you want to come. Let me know when you're ready to come back. And if you want to lead again, you can, or I'll just do it all from here. So it took me, I think I went back, I was there, but it took me a couple of weeks before I started leading again. And those group of guys, they had a 24-hour prayer list going for me.
Mm-hmm.
Ironically, the night that the sewer broke, that was the night they were praying through the whole night. So we haven't figured out who was taking that prayer at that time, but
They were probably sleeping.
they might have been sleeping because it was late enough. But really, it's just that I was sharing today with a friend how I had to wrestle with God after Kyle's death, after his suicide. And it really was a wrestling match. Like, I was so mad at God of, like, if you're omnipotent and you're omniscient, then how did you miss this? Why didn't you do something? And God really had to sit me down and tell me the truth. Like, wait, this is a broken world. If you expect perfect things out of this world, that's in heaven. So, that's probably what Brian talked about when you talk to him, is we long for heaven. I want heaven now. I want my parents back now. I want them to see Wesley and Eleanor. I want them to just adore them like I got adored by my granny, which is my mom's mom. And they don't get any of that. So, we want things to be right in this world. And what I know for a fact is that we live in a broken world. When sin entered, it's broken. And so there's cancer, there's addiction, there's all these other things, hate. I mean, none of it makes sense because it doesn't feel right to us. But that's because we don't belong here. There's another world waiting for us. It's called eternity. And this is just the first 70 something, 80 something, 90 something years of eternity is here on earth. So I look forward, I long for heaven, but I know I have a purpose too. So I'm not ready to go, but I am.
Yeah.
I got 2 kids that depend on me and a wife that she didn't leave me. So how can I leave her now? So she had every right to leave before.
First of all, I want to say marriage is a delicate balance. On a good day, so after the losses that you guys have had, it literally is a testament, because the whole time you guys are talking, all I'm thinking about the scripture, and I can't tell you where it's at right now, but where it says the cord of 3 strands is not easily broken. Mm-hmm. And so this balance that we have in our marriages, when you go through what you guys have gone through, it's very difficult to regain that balance. Death changes our view of things. Would you all agree with that? Mm-hmm. Yes, we agree on. So it changes your view on life, and it can even change our view of our spouses. It could put us in a place that we could view them differently because of the rough spots. So I want to talk about what you guys did right, because if there is any example of what to do in a situation like this, I mean, you guys have talked about, first of all, your relationship with the Lord, the fact that you prayed for him, Clarissa, even when he was telling you, I can't help you, even though the rejection, as I listened to that, and this is not directed towards you, Wade, but just knowing what it's like to give birth and to go through all the emotions of postpartum, and then to feel like you're in a place where you don't have that support. You're a testament to being able to be committed and to stay faithful. So communication, even though you guys struggled with communication, or that's my interpretation, you still communicated somehow and forgave each other. Talk about those 2 things. And okay, so we know where you were then, and tell us how you got to be where you are now. So first of all, how long have you been married?
It will be 14 years in this June. So coming up 14 years.
Tell us how you got to be where you are now.
I would say one thing, Wade is an excellent communicator. And I know that it sounded really bad when I said that he said, I can't help you with that, but he was still very much there and very much a part of our lives. So it wasn't like that all of the time. I just wanted to make sure and clarify that, and he's always been so good to be with me and the kids, and putting us, first behind God. And so, but one of the things that his counselor had suggested pretty early on for him was to like, think about what fills you up and do that. And for Wade, it was sitting around a fire. And so we had moved by this time from his parents' house to the rental house down in downtown New Albany with this fairly small backyard. So, but we got online, I ordered a outdoor fire pit. So we put that in, and that became kind of our sanctuary. We would, the kids we'd put them down for bed, and we'd build a fire. Sometimes we'd build a fire when the kids were awake too. And we'd sit around that fire and we would talk, or we would just sit there and not talk. But we still to this day love bonfires, and we will very regularly have a fire. So even though we don't necessarily get out on dates, like out to eat and things like that super often, we will go and sit around a fire and talk. And I feel like that has been one of the best things for us, is giving that space to talk. And we, are very honest. Wade's honest with me. If I'm not, there's a lot that I have not done well or right with the support that he needed. And Wade would be honest with me about that. And I think that's really important. And it hurts sometimes, but it was needed for us to be able to grow, and for me to be able to support him the way he needed, because I didn't know how to do that. So that was one of the biggest things. What do you think?
I think we just, we stayed committed. There was never, I wasn't telling her that I was leaving. I was saying, you all need to find, somebody better than me, because I knew how broken I was, how inept I was to be the father and be the husband that I needed to be for my family. And so I wanted something better for them. And thankfully she didn't listen to that recommendation. So I think it was just a commitment that we're just going to do this. We're going to figure out a way to do it. And slowly but surely, we just kept figuring out a way. Because when we moved out of Dad's house and moved down to the rental, I thought in my mind, we'll be here 3-6 months tops. Well, we get closing in on a year, and I'm like, I can't believe we're still here. This is crazy. It's a little bitty house, a little bitty backyard. We're outdoor people, so we want to be outdoor no matter what. And that was kind of, the fire pit was outdoors, and it was, there wasn't a whole lot. It was easy to mow back then too. Just a couple swipes and you're done. But I think the fact that we just keep talking all the way through. I think whatever it is, sometimes I'm not the most pleasant to talk to, but we try to listen to each other. Even if I don't deliver it well, she does still listen, thankfully. And hopefully I do the vice versa. But we just keep talking and keep, including other people in our story. It's whether her parents are wonderful. We spend a lot of time with Clarissa's parents. They're, no one will ever take my parents' place. But we're going on vacation with your mom and dad here in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
And we've done that for, I don't know how many years now. They're wonderful people to be around. And so I'm blessed to have in-laws that are so kind and compassionate and so easy to be around. And that's another big blessing.
And they still love you, Wade.
They do, despite all my ridiculousness. Yes.
Well, okay. So let's talk about somebody who's listening to us tonight, that their marriage is in a place where you all have been and they don't see a way out. What would you tell them right now if they were sitting across from you?
I would say open your Bible and read and pray over scripture, number one, because God at the center is what held us together. And so prayer is powerful. You pray that scripture over you, your spouse, whether they want to hear it or not, that's number one, I feel like. And that doesn't mean you're going to wake up and it's all going to be better, but God will give you the strength that you need. In your weakness, he is strong. And so he will give you the endurance you need, and it won't be easy. And two, reach out to a counselor. Absolutely. Like, even if it's just, I know sometimes one is willing to go and the other is not. Like, if your spouse isn't willing to go on your own. Like, any counseling is good counseling. And reach out to friends, and, you know, have somebody that you can talk to outside of your spouse for that support. And I mean, like we said, I think being forgiving, showing some grace, and giving space, but being available. It is a delicate balance, but it will get better. And it's hard to see that when you're in the midst of that, because you don't know how long it's going to be. And but I'm a firm believer that God stands with you wherever you are in that moment, and will give you the strength you need. So,
Wade, what would you say?
She took all the good answers. So, Teresa, I think about it too, and we haven't experienced this, but you and Tony, when you lose a loved one, two people lose the same loved one. And not that Clarissa didn't love my parents. I know she did, but it's just a different feeling. She didn't grow up with them, and she wasn't brought in. But anyways, and I remember my parents being this way with the death of my brother, is they were in two totally different places of grief. So we're never in the same place. Even a married couple is not in the same place when they've lost a child or, lost whatever. So it's just, I think that giving grace to each other, even though we're not acting like we deserve it. I know I didn't deserve it. I know there was times I was just out of brokenness and pain and hurting. I wasn't being nice. I wasn't being the husband that I needed to be, or the father I should have been. And yet she gave me grace for it. And the thing about it wasn't permanent. It's not a permanent place that you're going to be in, especially if you make the choice to work through your grief. Fortunately, I learned that in my mid-20s. I'm 46 now. So 20 years ago, my brother took his life this September. And that was my first real experience with grief. And I was woefully prepared and did it wrong, made a lot of mistakes in that grieving process. But I hung in there through Grief Share and learned a lot, and then shared it with other people through Grief Share. And it's, that community, I talked about that in mine a lot, is how powerful having a community like that. Because I went back through Grief Share after my mom passed away, and I did it again after my dad passed away. I didn't want to be at either one of those either. There was days where I was like, it's Tuesday, I got to go to church. I do not want to go, but how big of a hypocrite will Wade be if all these years I've told people you have to come back and then I don't go? So I was eating my own words and not liking myself, but going and showing up and being there. And it's so hard. You've been there. So the work, which is often the healthier things, are the harder things to do. And you get back to a place in life where there's still joy. I still have kids. I have amazing kids. I have an awesome wife, and we have a pretty cool life. I mean, it doesn't mean it's stress-free. It doesn't mean we're at 0 or, maybe we're -2 or something. I don't know. But yeah, it can happen. It's just, I think if they're in that moment, if that couple's in that moment of just really struggling, keep struggling, keep trying. It is worth it. There's for me, most people maybe feel this way, but I remember when we brought Eleanor home, and then when we added Wesley, it was like there's a different commitment in my marriage when there's kids involved. I just felt that sense, and I think other people do too. So but it's easy to be in my grief. I know I was selfish. I know I was doing things that were about me, and it was about trying to heal my pain or to work through it, or to just to feel it and get through it. But yeah.
With that said, though, Wade, had you not done that, so let's back up a little bit and look at the previous losses that you worked through. Not that you are ever in a perfect place after a loss, but after Kyle passed away, you worked on your grief. After your mom passed away, you worked on your grief. Had you not done that, look how different, if you'd have stuffed all of that, look, at the possibility of how this would have turned out maybe differently. Because and that's what I want people to hear. Don't put it off. Don't put it off, because even though you don't want to, because the number one thing I wanted to do was isolate, because you're in so much pain. And I know you said you felt like you were selfish because you had a family, but the other perspective of that though, Wade, had you not been honest with Clarissa, even though it was painful, you were honest enough, you loved her enough, and you loved your children enough to be honest to say, this is where I am. And then you worked through your grief. And, I'm not judging how it happened one way or another. However, it's not selfish to work through your grief. If you don't, then possibly you're not going to be to the place that you and Clarissa are right now. Is there anything else either one of you would like to say about marriage, grief, whatever's on your heart?
I would say, I believe in seasons. I played a lot of sports too growing up. So there's, season for football, season for baseball, season for whatever. And I feel like that's our lives make up these seasons. And to me, a season is not permanent. It's temporary. It's only for a short amount of time. And so I've always felt like I can endure a season, but if I believe it's permanent, that's a different deal. Like if I could never have chocolate, this life is a lot less worth living if I can't have chocolate cake or chocolate chip cookies or whatever. So, it's temporary. What you're going through, the heartache you feel, the brokenness that you are experiencing, it's not forever. It's just for now. And so if you can hang on, if you can struggle through it, if you can work through it, if you can, work through it with your spouse and your kids or, community, then you can get to the other side. That's us. That's what you keep talking about. And I don't even realize it. It's weird to me for you to say we're a miracle. I'm like, no, we're not. We're just people. We're just Clarissa and Wade. So that's, if somebody's listening and they're in a bad place in their marriage, they're struggling through, and it's a dynamic like ours. It's not forever, but it can take longer. If you don't do the right things, if you don't see a counselor, if you don't have community, if you don't seek the Lord and his help and, become a prayer warrior, have a prayer warrior over you. Yeah, it can be a bad deal. And I mean, my little brother is lost in addiction. It's 20 years since he became an addict when our older brother took his life, and I haven't seen him for 6 years, and I don't know what he's up to. And I feel for him because he's so broken inside, and it's just on a cycle. And I don't want to be on that cycle. I see that and I'm like, man, I'm so glad I'm not there. I hate it for him, but that's his choice. It's not mine.
Sometimes the grieving process, while it's very painful, can open the door for intimacy with in a couple's marriage that you might not ever achieve otherwise. Would you guys agree with that statement?
Yes.
I think for me, I call it commitment. Just knowing, and even talking about it now, just thinking about like what all Clarissa went through, because you're not aware of it in the moment. There's no way. I'm just seeing my hurt, my pain, my loss, but just now recounting kind of what all we went through and what all I put her through and how we hung in there and we did it. And I'm so grateful for God, and that he was carrying both of us through it at times. I'm sure. I know he was carrying me through it. And there's times where he probably put he had the whole Thaxton family on his back, and I'm grateful for that. So.
Yeah. Well, you guys, I do believe you're a miracle. I think your story is so inspiring, and I'm absolutely thrilled that you came and you shared the vulnerability and the hard parts and the honesty. We need people to understand that we can go through hard things and make it through to the other side. And you guys are an example of that. And I can't tell you how grateful I am that you guys were willing to come and share this with us tonight. Thank you both so very much.
You're welcome, Teresa. Glad to be here. Glad to be a part of your mission and what you're doing and trying to help people. I love that. I remember meeting you in that first grief share meeting, and I was like, this lady's different. She's already in the midst of your grief. You're already concerned about other people. And that doesn't happen a lot with people when they're in the midst of their grief. they don't tend to see outside of their grief. And I knew when I saw you and Tony, and you guys were already seeing outside of your grief and seeing other people hurting and caring for those other people, and then becoming, a leader for Grief Share. I was like, yeah, this is a different person.
Yeah.
So we're great. We're glad to be a part of you and Tony's lives.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to make me cry, but that's not a natural thing. So I know that God has put me in a time of where he wants to use the hurt and the pain, because, when you guys share your story, the pain is palpable. I could just feel the pain that the journey that you guys walk through. And it's not natural. It's not a natural occurrence for you to be able to get through that and be where you are now. And so I hope that people that are listening to us here tonight, I hope what they hear is there is a way. There is a way.
Without a doubt.
Without a doubt, there's a way. It's not always easy. Clarissa, you both have shared it. It's not easy, but there is a way. And there's people out there that want to help you. They want to support you. They want to help you move to that next place. Don't do it alone. Please don't do it alone, because then you spiral into those places that you may not recover from if you try to bear the burden alone. So thank you. Thank you very much, guys. And maybe I can think of another episode topic that I could have you guys come chat about. I just love you guys. I love your story. I love the way that you've taken your grief and turned it around to help other people.
Yeah.
We love you too.
Love you too. Thanks for having us.
Okay. Well, that's all I have for you guys tonight. So until next time, take care.
Thank you for listening to the Grief Mentors podcast with Teresa Davis. Subscribe or follow wherever you listen to podcasts, and be sure to share this episode with someone in your sphere of influence that needs it today.